Hey, FlimsyLunchTray here, and welcome to World of Warships on Random's Trap Domination mode, where we're in the North Carolina, the Tier 8 American battleship that's been in the game for a very, very long time. And ironically, as I was grinding North Carolina up to Montana on the EU during the recent dockyard for Wisconsin, I just discovered I have never featured the North Carolina in doing like a Friday highlight per se. I've done a upgraded commander build video back in May of 2021, and I got to thinking, the game has moved on, so I'm beginning to update some of those videos. Like I did an updated video on the USS Massachusetts just because, you know, some commander skills and perks and things have changed around. I mean, it's even like when you're looking in the back in the day, back in 2021, you look at your port screen and you're looking at equipping your ship. I mean, even where the consumables and all these things were a completely different location. It was back when your combat signals were a part of your exterior tab, if I remember right, and you'd have to go there and mount. So you couldn't do it all on one screen like you can now. So I'm going to pause here just real quick because this is a post edit. And often when I do these Friday highlights, I like to try to use the name of the title if the ship, for example, has a nickname. Like Massachusetts, you have her affectionately known as Big Mammy. And here with North Carolina, she also has a nickname known as the Showboat. So if I'm going to use it in the title of the video, I should probably, for the history buffs, insert this in, or maybe I catch a lot of flack for not. But I'm going to go ahead and start in two different sections of the U.S. Naval Institute. Hopefully this doesn't take too long. Let's see, where to start. So they're talking here a little bit about the ship, but although it is now the newer Iowa-class battleships that are once again in the public eye as part of the fleet, there was a time when photographs of the USS North Carolina could be found in just about every newspaper across the country. As the first U.S. battleship commissioned since the West Virginia BB-48 in 1923, and the first of the fast battleships, the North Carolina and her sister ship Washington, BB-56, set the standard for America's new battle fleet from her keel laying on 27th of October 1937 at the New York Navy Yard through her commissioning on the 9th of April 1941 and the builder's trials that followed. The media coverage was almost non-stop, and as a result, the North Carolina was nicknamed the Showboat. It was a name that would stick with her through her active service and long after. Another section, if I can find it here. Let's see here. I think this is who is talking? There's a first-person perspective here in talking about the nickname for the North Carolina. The North Carolina BB-55 and the Washington BB-56, which I think they said it here, but the Washington came into service just a few months after North Carolina, began their shakedown cruise in company in September 1941. They joined up at Hampton Roads. The North Carolina coming from New York Navy Yard and the Washington from the Philadelphia Navy Yard. North Carolina arrived at Hampton Roads first, and as a senior commanding officer, I chose to anchor upstream. When the Washington came in, she was 500 or so yards downstream. The day before the two ships were to start for Guantanamo, I called a conference of the skippers and executive officers to settle some items of collaboration before we put to sea. At that meeting, as the meeting was breaking up, the executive of the Washington made reference in a joking way to something that was news to me and I think to my XO, Commander Andrew Shepard. He said that the men of the Washington had taken up to calling the North Carolina, quote, that Showboat. The men in the Washington were well aware the North Carolina was getting a great deal of attention throughout the country in daily newspapers, on the radio networks, and in the magazines. All this was understandable because she was the nation's first new battleship in 18 years. Of course, Washington was right on her heels, commissioned within a few months or so after us, but I think the difference was we were operating out of the New York Navy Yard, and they were close to the and we're very close to the press. I guess the Washington was feeling a little left out. The next morning, I was discussing plans for getting underway with Commander Shepard. I told him that I wanted the crew at quarters for a formal inspection and that the usual honors would be exchanged when we passed the Washington. We were the senior ship, and she would follow us out of the harbor. On the spur of the moment, I told the exec, after we play the Star Spangled Banner, let's have the band play Here Comes the Showboat. My crew had been hearing the scuttlebutt from the Washington about our new name, so when the band burst forth the Showboat song, they thought that was just great. There was no question that the men of North Carolina took to the nickname like ducks to water, and the battleship was thereafter the Showboat. So, North Carolina, I really like this as a tech tree battleship. I think the North Carolina, in terms of a Tier 8 battleship, I think she's among the most balanced battleships at Tier 8, among the most balanced battleships in general across other tiers in the game. Just overall, it's not a complicated ship per se to play. You have a good Sigma, you have these 406s, you have, you know, decent AA. I mean, the ship is quite mid in a lot of regards. I say mid. It's quite average in many different characteristics. I mean, even during one of the big King of the Seas tournaments some years ago when it was Tier 8, I mean, North Carolina, you saw North Carolina been playing a lot in the competitive scene here. And so today I want to showcase North Carolina in 2024, and I'll do an Upgrade Commander Build 2024 edition on the North Carolina tomorrow. And this was a pretty fun battle. Some frustrations. It's not going to be with our CV, which is the newer American CV line, going up from Independence, Yorktown to Essex, right? I'm even going to compliment our CV player, but I'm going to be very fed up with a different player on our team, which before long you'll probably figure out who that is. Now, I do have to say, before we get underway in this battle commentary and talking about the strengths and weaknesses of the North Carolina, this battle is weighed in our favor as a Tier 8 battleship versus Tier 6 ships. North Carolina plays really well at top tier. She does still quite good even at same tier matchmaking. Of course, once you get to seeing tier 10s, hello. But once you start to get the tier 10s, you know, North Carolina is going to struggle a little bit going up against the likes of, you know, Yamato, Montana, Kremlin, and the list goes on and on. But when she is top tier, she's a powerhouse. I think that's the best way I could phrase it. I view the Massachusetts in that same light as the Massachusetts being a South Dakota class battleship. And this ship still actually even existing today as a museum ship in North Carolina. So we pick up our first kill as our, however you pronounce that, cruiser up in front of us has perhaps bitten off more than he can chew. As you saw, a lot of deep water torpedoes. They have an enemy Asashio out here on the flank, and that's going to make our life difficult for us as a battleships. I mean, you kind of see enemy battleships grouped up there. Ooh. Let's take out the Yamahari. Don't go broadside in Yamahari. It's vulnerable, much more so than in North Carolina. But you see the battleships that have grouped up there in G3, excuse me, and we're kind of doing the same thing in was that H4, I4, and we're going to want to push through, but we really need our friendly Mahan, who's skimping the outer edges of the southern part of the cap, to go out in front of us to help spot and pick up the Asashio, because that is despite being top tier and having that Asashio, it's still going to be a big pain for us to have to deal with. So for now, we're going to be angled out here. And we're just keeping on what is our Mahan doing. So let me go ahead and talk about the pros and cons of North Carolina according to the World of Warships wiki. Pros is excellent main battery range. When using range build, she can shoot from 27 kilometers away without spotting aircraft. So right now our range is, right now our range is 23.26. Powerful armor-piercing shells with very good damage and penetration. She has a high Sigma. Now here it says 2.0 for a Tier 8 battleship, but that's incorrect. North Carolina has received 2 buffs in the meantime as the life of the ship has gone on. And now her Sigma value has been increased from 2.0 to 2.05. And that her deck armor plating was increased from 37mm to 38mm. So in terms of buffs and nerfs, North Carolina has been largely untouched here in the game. Very durable when properly angled with a thick lower belt and 38mm deck armor, so they got that right here. Very strong AA suite, so you can stand your ground against Tier 8 and Tier 6 CVs pretty well. Again, Tier 10 CVs is a different story. Significant speed improvement over her preceding ships like Colorado and Mexico. Useful for supporting allies and can cap areas when needed. Decent turning radius for a battleship and excellent concealment with all relevant upgrades. If you build full into the concealment, you are rocking 12.3 kilometers, which is really good. In terms of her cons, due to the heavy weight of her AP shells, they have a longer flight time, meaning that excessive lead is required to hit a target. You're going to see that as this battle develops, especially in towards the later half, as we now are turning in to deal with this remaining North Carolina. Poor main battery dispersion. They kind of complement the ship that has really high sigma, but at the same time have poor main battery dispersion. Her horizontal dispersion is almost 300 meters, but 292 meters, and her vertical dispersion is 175. So especially when you're shooting at range, you'll see at times her dispersion is quite wide. Sigma is like the chances of your shells landing in the center of the target, where dispersion is talking about that vertical to horizontal. Now, when you're playing mid-range, which at the tier 8 and up, I really consider being 12 to 15 kilometers, you'll really see that the grouping and the dispersion of North Carolina shines much more than playing, 18 to 20 plus kilometers away, right? The closer you are, the better off you are with your shell groupings, of course, with the North Carolina. Most battleships are like that here in the game. As now you can already see in chat, I'm asking politely if our Mahan can move up with us, because we don't really want to have an Asashio camping out on like H1 and torpedoing us battleships who are trying to move up, because we don't have map control. Enemy team is much better off in the map control and having both Bravo and Charlie cap, and we down here, and we're down here at the Alpha cap. So we are going to need to, and there he is in H1. I could actually remember where he was. It's like, he's sitting there because he's sitting on the cap. That's probably why I remembered that. So we're already just going to take a shot at a destroyer. You won't get those big damage hits, of course, like you may be on a cruiser or battleship at times, but the percentage base of shooting at a destroyer improves your base XP. Even if you only take 2,000 to 3,000 hit points off the destroyer, it's still more than base XP than getting 2,000 to 4,000 to 5,000 hit points off of a battleship. As we have the other enemy North Carolinas being quite cheeky and taking shots at us all the way from behind the center island in Bravo cap, and we're going to move up and we're going to be very paranoid about this Asashio off to the left. So, continuing on with talking about the cons. Despite speed improvement, many battleships can outrun her. I mean, especially you're going to see that if you start seeing a lot of tier 9 and tier 10 battleships, if you're bottom tier in the matchmaking. Extensively covered in 32mm armor, vulnerable to high explosive spam and AP overmatch. I mean, most battleships in the game at high tier, you could say that. Very easy to Citadel when strung broadside because of the Citadel's water location at the waterline, which we'll look more at tomorrow. Poor protection against torpedo and torpedo bombers due to the torpedo damage reduction being a mere 19%. Now, I did check that in the ship, WoW ship builder. If I pull up survivability here, it says torpedo protection, it says 21.4%. So I'm not sure if that's something changed or if there's one or two that's inaccurate here, but it's 19 or 21.4%. Even though North Carolina's AA is strong, it can easily be destroyed by high explosive shells, rockets, or fire, which again, most tier 8 battleships are going to be right in that same category with the North Carolina. So they're like some things they have to kind of dig, so to speak, on the North Carolina. I mean, even most battleships, tier 8 battleships in the game, they can be vulnerable when broadsided, right? So it is what it is. So, more of the battle commentary Friday highlight here. So we have the enemy Cleveland that's moving up along, getting much closer to us. Kind of one of the things that if you pay attention and looking at the mini-map here, the enemy team is pushing into what I call, quote-unquote, a hornet's nest. The enemy team has the map control, right, as we pick up the Confederate, but most of our ships are down here in the southwestern end of the map. So this hornet's nest becomes much more angry the closer you get to it. If, like, for example, as the red team, they're not really cohesively pushing together. So then you have different ships here that are going to... There's another North Carolina. Was there a div or something? I don't remember. But if they're not cohesively pushing together, then you're going to have a ship that it's going to take a lot more of the focus fire. Now we haven't even, I don't think we've even used a hill yet in this game, if I remember correctly, just because it's not that we're not trying to hide behind our friendly battleships. It's just been in terms of our positioning and how we've been moving and proceeding around the map. Now the Nagato and Kansas are going to take a lot more focus fire than we are, and our Mahan, who didn't even help us flip Alpha, is not going to go bother chasing the Isashio, which is still going to be a big issue for us. As I'm checking the Farragut torpedoes here, so actually he's turning out to get a salvo off on the North Carolina, so that's or enemy Farragut. So that's why I'm kind of going nose more into the island here. But our team does take out the Farragut, so that's no problem. So we're going to pick up the speed, and we're going to be going more bow in towards the North Carolina now, as our team cohesively pushes up towards Bravo Cap. Other things to talk about with the North Carolina. Well, as I said, she has 9, 4, and 6mm guns. Between her high explosive shells and her armor piercing shells, her high explosive shells do a max damage of 5,700. Her penetration of them are 68 millimeters. Single shell chance, if this is still accurate, has a 36% chance of starting a fire. Her AP does damage of 13,100, a mass of 1,225 kilograms. And then the initial shell velocity is 701 meters a second. So there's some other battleships that have a higher initial shell velocity in the game here. So she has a very good main battery. Her secondary battery is like, okay, you don't play North Carolina for secondaries. Like that's something you would do more with the Massachusetts as an example, where North Carolina is a pretty good competitive tier 8 battleship. I mean, time has gone on since, I'm thinking a lot of the King of the Seas tournament back in the day, as the Isashio is actually quite far away, and our CV is actually focusing the Isashio and keeping him off of us, which is much appreciated. So that is very nice. But of course, since I'm making this statement, and there's a lot more tier 8 battleships in the game, even something like the Imahari can be quite deadly in dealing with at tier 8, but it doesn't have the same robust armor scheme outside its fancy trick of having increased shell dispersion when you press the high precision spotter on Imahari as an example. So the Mahan, again, he's even avoiding Bravo Cap. He's just kind of sailing all around, so he's not really going for key objectives. So our team is pretty upset with him. That's because he doesn't feel like he's contributing a lot here. Where it'd be much better if he would to go after the Isashio. He outguns the Isashio, if I remember correctly. Now our CV has moved down to the bottom end of the map. He was paying attention to how we lost map control of mid and north, so he moved accordingly. We had the high explosive loaded for the Isashio, so we're trying to see if we can get some shots here, and then hoping at some point, as we do land a shell there and starting a fire, but the Isashio is going to DCP, so I'm going to let our team know, particularly the CV, that the Isashio is DCP'd. And you can see the Independence is just flying around all over for him to be spotted. He's trying to help him get finished off here. So we are going to compliment our CV player. I don't think I have yet, but we do compliment him in this battle, despite me not liking CVs in general. Now I go ahead and I switch to armor piercing here as I'm going to go up behind this island, because there's the CV sitting there in the back, and we do not have the range to hit the Wesser where we're at, the tier 6 German aircraft carrier. So we're going to pop spotter plane here. So this is something, if like in the third slot as an example, if you took the artillery plotting room mod 1 to get your main battery range up to like 27 kilometers, I wouldn't have needed to pop the spotter plane there, right? I mean, you're looking on the mini map with spotter plane up, and we can basically hit about everything on the map here in Trap. But here you're going to begin to see the longer shell travel time, and also more of the dispersion at range as we get the high caliber in one Citadel. So probably CV typically if you get hit, I mean, that's the CV is going to go ahead and start moving as we're checking this island here. So we're popping in and out. I want to get a little bit further away from that high point there on the left of the island. So I'm going to talk about shell when you're firing in a battleship dealing with islands here. There's probably a few pointers I could point out here. But because of a longer shell travel time in the CV is beginning to accelerate, he is going to completely avoid that salvo, although we had some pretty good shells there landed that would have landed there in the mid. Now I'm going to slow down here. I want to get another salvo off before I continue pushing up north towards the CV and the Asashio. So here I'm leading 20.7 kilometers away, taking the shot. We're going to resume accelerating here. We'll see how this salvo does. I mean, here you can kind of see the shells are kind of widening out as they go. You have some that seem to want to go to the right, some that want to go to the left as we just get two overpins. And when we're looking at this high point here in the island, a lot of players can make this mistake. I still do from time to time. We want to make sure our rear turret is not going to hit this peak of the mountain chain here, right? So you can see me, I'm waiting a little bit longer. I'm kind of feeling out how much do I need to aim. But aiming almost similar to the same time I was earlier, but we've closed the distance since. And all 9 of our 406s make it past the island. So don't be too anxious to try to get your shot off even sooner. Wait and see if you get a better result as we pick up 3 pins and 1 overpin and the dev strike and killing the CV. So we're going to continue pushing forward. I think that's where I complimented the CVs. They're doing great spotting for us, so on and so forth. And I should be switching to the high explosive here, but I was very happy to kill the CV and complimenting others. But we have armor piercing loaded in the meantime. Independence is flying back up to spot the Asashio. I'm being cheeky and fun in chat, like give me my squid boy. And so one of our teammates says all yours, so very nice of him to say. And Asashio is not really taking any evasive maneuvers here, so could have led pipe just a tiny bit more, but we still connect in getting 2 shells there and picking up the Kraken Unleashed. So North Carolina is a really fun tier 8 battleship. I like playing her over the Monarch, the British tier 8 battleship for sure. I think she's just got a lot going for her as a tier 8 battleship. It's been quite balanced in the game overall, in my opinion. So it's going to be 175,000 damage with the Confederate, Dev Strike, Kraken Unleash, and the high caliber. With 14 planes shot down, 5 kills, and 5 citadels, with some assisted captures in here as well, and being a battleship player. We only had a few secondary hits just towards the end there. We're top the team with 2,857 base XP, excuse me, and topping on our team. So it's good cohesive team effort there towards the end. And with the Roma, he was pretty frustrated with the Mahan. He did what he could. He did take some deep water torpedoes, I believe, as well. I mean, most of our shell damage came from the armor piercing. You really were only using high explosive when we're dealing with submarines or destroyers, an example. We only took 2,600 damage this game, which was quite bizarre. Kind of felt like that's one of the reasons I wanted to feature this video, because that's just not normal. And 383,000 credits with premium count all said and done. But in talking about the damage, it was just in our positioning. The other battleships were just getting ahead of us. You know, I think we lost. We had a Nagato on our team. The key went down. So we weren't leading the charge, which isn't, I would say, something that is per se the strong suit of North Carolina, because there's other brawling battleships like you have tanks like the Tier 8. The Tier 8 battleship like Bismarck, but I'm trying to think of the Tier 8 Soviet battleship, or you can hit something like the Lenin, the Premium. There's other battleships that can play that tank role a little bit more. So you're not necessarily always wanting to lead the charge with North Carolina, so to speak. Now, when it's needed to, of course, if your team's lost map control, so on and so forth, you don't want to chase an Asashio. Like Asashio would love for you to chase it as a big dumb battleship player, right? But she excels in that medium range to even long range supporting role. But I think she shines most in the mid range, that 12 to 15 kilometers, especially when her concealment, if you build for it full, it's 12.3 conceal, which is absolutely phenomenal and really good just as a standard Tier 8 tech tree battleship. So in terms of the tech tree battleships in the game, I think the Tier 8, she's kind of a crown jewel among other Tier 8 battleships. She shines. I think she's very well balanced. She's not overpowered. She's not underpowered. And in the hands of a skilled Battleship player, I think you can have really good results like this, and even perhaps better than what I've done in this game. So, that being said, tomorrow we're doing an upgraded commander build video on North Carolina 2024 edition. So if you liked today's video, give it a thumbs up. If you didn't, give it a thumbs down. Subscribe if you do want to see more. If you have subscribed, thanks so much. I really appreciate it. Thank you to my Patreon supporters for wrapping up the giveaway. I've given away the prizes to our NA audience, so the NA winners of 3rd, 4th, and 5th place. And then hopefully later today we'll have the giveaway out to our Asia winner and our EU winner in the 1st and 2nd place. So until next time, take care.